Hello everyone and welcome to 2025. Isn't that a incredibly frightening but also very exciting thing to think about? This is a book podcast, a novel review. My name is Seamus, I am the host, and every week I speak about a different book. If this is your first time joining me, thank you so much for joining. I hope you get something out of it. And if you're a returning customer, thank you so much for coming back. Yeah, 2025, how incredibly frightening, but also very exciting because I hope I'm going to have some good books to read this year and therefore some good episodes, hopefully. And I hope everyone has got some good books on their lineup for 2025. Today, we're kicking things off with Cesare Pavese, The Moon and the Bonfires, which is going to be the first, book that I'm doing for my World Book Tour. This is a World Book Tour episode. If this is your first time joining and you don't know what that is, basically in 2025, every month I'm going to read a different country's book or a couple of books. I'm going to read a male and female author from that respective country. Today I'm starting with Italy and Cesare Pavese, so there's going to be a female writer coming up very, very shortly. And basically I'm just going to try go to a few different cultures. I'm trying to go to some weird and wacky and wonderful countries. And yeah, this is the first one, so that's going to be really fun. I'm going to chat about that in a second. But first, I just wanted to quickly chat about, I was just in Bath over the New Year's period, and I stumbled across a bookshop called Persephone Books. They're also a publishing house, and what they publish is almost exclusively out-of-print 20th century women, which I thought was absolutely wonderful because I was just talking in the last episode about how when I was at university, my professor told me that if you take a scattergun approach to Western literature, historical Western literature, you're more often than not going to hit a white male, and there's nothing wrong with that because we can't do anything about that. It's just how the world was at the time. And she said, you're just going to hit a white male. And, I thought about that and reflected on that, and that's sort of where this World Book Tour came from. It's the wanting to get out of maybe that Western mindset and read something or read books from other cultures and understand their writers and stuff. But then I came across this bookshop and it was just kind of like, the peeling back at the clouds to see the sun kind of thing, that suddenly there was a bookshop giving me out of print 20th century women. And the shopkeeper there was incredibly helpful. She was incredibly knowledgeable, and it was a beautiful, beautiful bookshop for its own regard. But, they're a publishing house that now publish these out-of-print women authors. So the first book I got was Little Boy Lost by Marghanita Laski. It's apparently about trying to find a boy that is lost, quelle surprise. And it looks really, really interesting. It's sort of about what that actually entails, trying to find this boy, and then what happens when he's actually found. So that sounds really good. The Victorian Chaise-Lounge by Marghanita Laski. I didn't even realize that I'd bought two books from the same author. That is crazy. Hopefully they're good. That's really funny. The Victorian Chaise-Lounge by Marghanita Laski. This is a bit of a novella, and it seems to be about a woman that is invalid in her old age, and then one day she wakes up 80 years previously in her arch enemy's body, I believe. So that sounds really wacky and wonderful, and it's apparently quite frightening as well, so that's good. And then Miss Buncle's book by D.E. Stevenson. From memory, this one was about a woman that pretends to be a man writing a book about her town. And I think it's about sort of the social implications of that, but also what she uncovers because she's writing from the position of a man. So I thought that was really interesting, and I might do that for my English book for the World Book Tour if I do make it to England. I think I will make it to England. So yeah, really great books. I had no idea that I'd bought two books from the same author. That's really funny. But great little bookshop. I'm pretty sure they ship online, but independent bookshop as well. That's important. And I think that was sort of the moral of this story is support the independent bookshops because they are doing some good work. Like this is a clear example of a bookshop doing some good work. So support the independent bookshops because they are doing right by literature. Housekeeping, if you would like to like and subscribe, I would really appreciate that. That would be, that would really make my day. I greatly, greatly appreciate that. 5-star reviews are also really lovely for me to see and help other people find the show. So yeah, as always, this is a free podcast, so just enjoy it. Sit back, enjoy the show. I hope you get something out of it. And if you have any comments, concerns, questions, queries, put them in the comments, send me an email, contact me in some way. I'll very happily talk to you, especially about books. Like there's nothing better than that. So yeah, enjoy. Okay, the first edition of the World Book Tour, Cesare Pavese, The Moon and the Bonfires. I picked this because I've actually read some Cesare Pavese before. I've read some of his shorter stories and I absolutely loved him. And I've always sort of wanted an excuse, I guess, to read more of him and read some of his longer work, such as a novel. Maybe, it might even be a novella, really. It's 137 pages or something, so it's quite short. This is the translated edition, I should say, by Penguin Classics. And this is translated by Tim Parks, just in case you are wondering where this particular edition came from and which one I'm specifically speaking about. That's good to note. And I mean, off the bat, I guess, I think I prefer his shorter works. Just from what I read, I thought his shorter stories were incredibly sharp and really kind of, I guess, evoked something more in me. That's not saying this didn't evoke something. I think this book was really, really interesting, but I think in terms of him at the moment, I think I just prefer his shorter stuff because I think just the punchiness of a short story can be so effective sometimes, and dipping your toe in that little bit can really leave you reeling. Whereas sometimes in the longer form, you can be left kind of wondering, okay, what was that all about? And I think that's a big part of this book, is that it's not confusing or anything in that kind of sense, but Tim Parks actually wrote about it in the introduction. He said there's an attraction and an uneasiness towards Cesare Pavese. And I think that really comes out in this book because it is incredibly attractive. It's incredibly seductive, but there's just this uneasiness about it that I think left me not reeling from the book at all, but left me sort of emotionally distant from the book. And I think I got to the end of it and I was wondering, okay, what was the point of all this? But I also think that that's a key element within the story itself that I'll talk about in a moment. First, I think I would do a bit of a brief overview just so we're all caught up. The book is more or less about this guy called Eel. That is his nickname, I guess. I believe it's his nickname. I can't actually remember if he ever reveals his real name, but he's just called Eel for the sake of the story. And he's this guy that's grown up. He's an orphan, but he's grown up sort of in this little community in Italy, and he's worked on a farm with all these people, these great characters. And then when he gets of age, he actually leaves and goes to America to make his fortune. And so the story is about him coming back after 20 years. He's been back a few times and been to Genoa and stuff like this, but coming back to this particular town and sort of haunting his old places with his old best mate, and just sort of experiences of what that is, what that means, sort of coming back to these moments, coming back to these places where he grew up and had this strong emotional attachment to, and what that means now that he's actually been away for 20 years. So it was kind of like my bread and butter. It was kind of like a perfect book, I thought, to start this world book tour in, because that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to have these Italian, for this particular country because we're in Italy, I wanted to have an Italian writer writing about an Italian setting, and it seemed really perfect because it was going to be about a guy that had actually left Italy and then come back, and it was going to be those experiences of, okay, what is a home? What constitutes a home? And I think that's one of the big questions is, what is a home? What does it mean to leave a place and then come back to that place? And I'll start off with a quote. The quote is from page 8. And I thought it was sort of like this really lovely quote, I guess. And it sort of came really early in the book, page 8. And I thought, oh, great, we're really onto something here. But I think it actually sort of set you up for the story, but it didn't actually give you the answers. The answers sort of came a lot earlier in the book, perhaps. And so this is speaking about, what is a home essentially. So here we go. Start quote. What's it about? You need a place that's home, if only for the excitement of leaving. Home means not being alone, knowing there's something of you in the people, the trees, the land, something waiting for you even when you're away. Still, it's hard to live easy here. For a year now, I've been keeping an eye on the place, escaping from Genoa whenever I can, and it still baffles me. It takes me time and experience to grasp these things. Can it be true that at 40, with all I've seen of the world, I still don't know what my village is like? End quote. And so here he's exploring this notion of, like, if he's come back to this village and the village is completely different, if we've been away for, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, if we come back and it's completely different, this home that we have in our minds, do we have a home? Is that place still our home? And that's kind of what he's talking about. It's that thing that compelled him to leave. This place compelled him to leave, but it also drew him back in a way that he doesn't quite understand. And now that he's gotten back, it's a bit different from what he was expecting. And it's kind of the emotion attached to that of, okay, well, I don't have parents, so I've got this place that I think is my home, this sort of area where the farm is that I grew up and these people that I knew. And, I've gone away and now I've come back and it's a bit different to what I was expecting and it's a bit different than what's been in my mind. So what actually constitutes a home? Within this story, there is kind of a thread running through about sort of the darkness that's gone on, and that darkness is World War II. Of course, the fascists in Italy was, a major component. And so that's affected this town in a way as well, in that, he's sort of been driven away. There's a bit of mystery going on about what's happened and who's on what side and all these kind of thing. And that's kind of seems to have fractured the town a bit, which I think is really interesting. But I didn't find that that was a major component to the story. It was like a big aspect of the story, but it wasn't a major component that I was, I guess, overtly concerned with through this story, because I was more reading it for the emotional journey of this one particular character and how he, I guess, relates to this land that he thinks is his homeland. So I spoke about the attraction and the uneasiness to this book. And I think one of the components that I sort of found attractive but a bit uneasy was I found the characters quite sentimental, but also very unsentimental as well. And it wasn't like one character, Eel, was particularly sentimental while someone else was unsentimental, and they kind of bounced off each other in that way. I found all the characters that we kind of, associate with, quite sentimental and unsentimental at the same time. At times they're really indulgent, whereas in other times they're just completely unsentimental towards what's going on. And it kind of, I don't know if it confused me, but it just kind of like put me on edge a bit. But then I was also wondering if that's just the nature of man, and that's how we actually need to be. And, these are Italian farmers. And I think to be a farmer is to be quite sentimental, but also quite unsentimental, because to be a farmer, you've got to be conscious and in tune with sort of weather patterns and nature. And you've got, a particular love for the land that you're working. And, and this time they would have been working a lot of it by hand. So there's a really strong emotional connection to the land. And that would have made you quite sentimental to this place. Obviously World War II's gone on. So you're fighting for your land and you're defending your land, your home. So there's sort of the sentimentality attached with that. But then I guess to be a farmer, you've got to be quite unsentimental as well. If a plant has got, a wood rot or some kind of mold on it or something like this, an infection, it's sick, you've just got to be like quite ruthless and rip that plant out and just like carry on. So I guess like to be a farmer is kind of be sentimental and unsentimental at the same time. Because you've got to obviously love your land and pay attention to weather patterns and have like a really strong connection, but you've also got to be quite ruthless at times. So I found that unsettlingly attractive, but it also kind of made sense once I'd reasoned with it for that. But I was kind of, I don't know, I think I wanted more sentimental, I guess. I wanted more sentimentality from particularly Eel, the main character. And I don't think I got that. But I think that sort of lends to the overarching story, which is Eel kind of feels out of place. And I've got another quote here on page 61, which I'll just bring up now for you. And it's another beautiful quote about sort of, what it means to come back to a place that's different from what you imagine, come back to your home and not quite be your home. And what does that actually mean? So this particular quote starts with his friend Nuto, who's his old best friend from before when he was young. So this is how the quote goes. Start quote. Nuto was the only one left and he changed. He was a man like me. In a nutshell, I was a man too. I was someone else. And even if I had come back and found more as it used to be that first winter and summer, and then summer and winter over again, day and night for all those years, very likely I wouldn't have known how to react. I was coming from too far away. I wasn't part of the farm anymore. I wasn't a kid like Chinto now. The world had changed me. And it's this sort of wonderful dynamic between him and his friend Nuto, and it's kind of Nuto's stayed in this place the whole time, whereas Eel's left, and they both sort of feel unhappy, or you get the sense that they both kind of feel unhappy with their choices. And it kind of creates this illusion of, well, where do we find happiness then? If you're unhappy staying where you are for your entire life, but you're unhappy leaving for your entire life, like where do you find the balance between those two? And then of course, in this quote, he's talking about how he's come back to this place and the world has changed. He's changed as well. He's changed within the world. He's changed for himself. And he's come back and the farm is still there and it's still technically the same farm, but there's different people now. There's different people running the farm. There's different people working the farm. The village has changed. People have changed. And what he means by I was a man, now he was man, is people have now got these opinions that he might not necessarily agree with. Like I said, the fascism going on at that point in time. And so it's kind of this idea of what constitutes a home? What really constitutes a home? Because you go away, you come back and you're different and the place is the same, but the place is different. And so it's like, what is the point of it all? And that I found like a really strong, interesting thing to explore that I don't think he really gave an answer to, was this idea of Eel is an orphan and therefore he doesn't have parents. So his really strong emotional attachment is for this place. And he wants to leave this place to go make his fortune, to go make a name for himself, because he doesn't feel like he's anybody in this town. He's a poor orphan boy. That's how he's viewed. So he leaves to go make this fortune. He leaves to go make this name of himself. But then when he comes back, he finds that this place didn't really care about him. And I don't mean that in a harsh way, but I just mean that it's a farm and it moves on. And so he's come back and he's sort of reeling from the fact that he's left this farm to make a name for himself, to prove to this farm, this area, this town that he is someone. But by the time he comes back, there's no one there that really remembers him for who he was as a poor orphan boy. And so it kind of raises this question of, well, what are we doing it for? Like, did I go away because I wanted to go away? Or did I go away because I wanted to make a name for myself and prove myself to these people that don't even really exist? And I say exist in inverted commas because obviously everyone gets on with their own lives and everyone moves on at some point. So I've come back to now prove myself to these people that don't really exist because I was a nobody to them. They were nobody to me, really. But now I've come back to this homeland and there's just nothing going on. And it's really kind of, I guess, devastating story from that perspective because it kind of questions like, what are we doing with our lives and what's the point of it all? Like, are we doing stuff because we want to do it, or are we just doing stuff to try prove to other people that we're better than what they perceive us as to be? And by the time we've achieved that, the world's moved on without us and we're sort of left clutching at this idea of, well, I'm trying to be better than who I was. And so you see, this book is just incredibly evocative. I mean, it's incredibly sweeping. It sweeps some great questions of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a person existing in the world, what it means to actually try achieve something with your life. It's incredibly sweeping, but as you can see from the size if you're on YouTube, it's incredibly short. Like I said, what is it, 141 pages. There we go. So it's incredibly brief as well, which I think just sort of makes it this really kind of fast, almost fever dream of a novel, which makes it really nice. The prose is just so incredibly dreamy. You know, on the back it says insinuating, haunting, and lyrically pervasive. And I think that is absolutely perfect. It was a really nice book for those reasons. I mean, like I said, it sort of gives you a few answers at the beginning, but at the end, I felt like I didn't really have a strong answer. And I think that's kind of part of it, because at the end of the day, there's not an answer that I'd probably find from those questions that I'd find satisfying, because at the end of the day, they're incredibly personal questions that he's asking of you, the reader. You know, what does it mean to have a home? What does that look like for you? And obviously my definition, you know, Seamus's, my definition is going to be different of what a home is to your definition, dear listener. So it's sort of sad that you don't get an answer because, or I felt you didn't get an answer, because obviously that's really nice to read for that perspective. But I think that was also part of it, in that it's an incredibly personal journey and your definitions are going to be very different from my definitions. So Cesare Pavese, The Moon and the Bonfires, it was, you know, I mean, I love that on the back, lyrically pervasive. It was a fantastic little book, really nice to start off. The World Book Tour, I think, really good. I'm really excited to read the next book, which is Donatella del Trentino, A Girl Returned. It's a similar size, and I think it's going to be a similar-ish story in that it's about a girl returning. And I'm sort of really curious to read this and then sort of compare them and see how they stack up against each other. See if I can notice any similarities between them, which might be pervasive of Italian literature. And then, of course, hopefully just a great story as well. But for now, we're on The Moon and the Bonfires. What would I rate this out of 5? Like I said, I think I actually preferred some of his shorter stories. So I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it asked some very big questions and had some very beautiful prose to ferry it along the way. It is obviously, because translated, you are going to lose sort of that probable magic that's from the original text itself. That's not the book's fault. That's my fault for not being fluent in Italian, and that's going to be a constant issue throughout the year. So I'll probably say that every episode. 3.5 out of 5. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm very happy starting with this book because I thought it was a perfect way to kick off. So Cesare Pavese, The Moon and the Bonfires. So what was I reading this week? Well, this week I actually finished a book that I don't want to speak about and I don't want to reveal just yet. So today I'm going to be starting this, Donatella del Trentino, A Girl Returned. It's going to be part 2 of Italy month, which is January. And I'm looking forward to this book. like I said, I hope it's going to sort of give me some similarities to Cesare Pavese's book. I hope it's going to be a really interesting story. Di Pietrantonio is apparently a very, very good author, so I'm looking forward to that as well. You know, on the front it says a heartwarming as it is heart-rendering, so that's sort of a great sign as well. Italian author writing about Italian issues is exactly what I'm after. I hope it's going to be good, but of course, I will let you know. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you would like to like and subscribe, I would really appreciate that too. But as always, just thank you so much for paying attention, for tuning in, for listening to me ramble for about 20 minutes. So today, to take us away, I'm going to finish with a quote from Cesare Pavese, The Moon and the Bonfires. And I thought this was just another lovely quote about sort of what it means to have a home and what that actually looks like. And so here we go. I realise now that as a boy, even when I was chasing our goat or stamping angrily on the kindling in winter, or just playing, shutting my eyes to see if the hill would still be there when I opened them again, I was preparing for my destiny to live without a home, hoping that out there beyond the hills there was a richer, more beautiful world.